May 1987 brings us to Crash issue 40, and it's a bright, dynamic cover showing a motorbike jumping, based on the game Enduro Racer, reviewed in this issue. A nice touch is the biker in the background wearing a helmet with the letter CVG on it, a reference to rival magazine Computer and Video Games. This month brought 4 Crash smashes, so let's take a look at the top 10. This month there are 4 games in 9th place with 75%. The first is Throne of Fire by Melbourne House. This was developed by a team including Mike Singleton, the developer behind the Lords of Midnight. This is a game for 1 or 2 players. You play one of 3 princes, your task being to battle with your 2 brothers around the burning citadel and ultimately become king. In the 2-player game you each take control of 1 prince with the computer taking the 3rd. In the 1-player game the computer controls 2 princes. The game is in a split screen view so both players can play simultaneously. Richard Eddy thought this most enjoyable as a 2-player game, finding it simple and tiresome otherwise. He praised the compact screen layout, although felt the game didn't have the compulsion and depth of Mike Singleton's previous games. Paul Sumner agreed with Richard about the 1-player game being a bit weak, although he liked the tension created by the split screen view. Ben Stone felt that the large and beautifully animated characters and attention to detail of the castle make the game look exceptionally good, although like the other 2 reviewers, just found the game too easy to play and complete. The dual screen layout brings to mind games like Spy vs Spy from issue 19, or Deactivators from issue 34. The game looks pleasant enough to start with, although much of the screen seems to be wasted by an unclear map at the bottom. Ultimately, there just doesn't seem to be enough excitement in the game to make it interesting long term. It seems to be just a trudge around a lot of rooms that look similar. I certainly wouldn't have rated this game as high as 75%. It's not one I'd bother with particularly. Also in 9th place with 75% is Raster Scan from Mastertronic. In this game you take control of a small spherical robot and have to repair your spaceship with the Raster Scan before it crashes into a nearby star. Gareth Adams found the game frustrating as the instructions weren't much help in understanding what needed to be done. He felt the movement to be very smooth, but was disappointed with the lack of sound. Paul described the graphics as absolutely brilliant, and felt that the momentum of your robot made the gameplay feel right. Although also disappointed with no sound effects, he felt the game was good value at £1.99. Mike Dunn also praised the graphics, and felt it to be worth a look, and one of the better cheapies. This is certainly a graphically original game, with the complexity of the backgrounds, the coloured pipes, and the clarity of your ball all working together well to make a game that's at least pleasant to look at. It bears something of a similarity to Impossible from issue 37 and Action Reflex from issue 31, but from a playability perspective isn't as good as either of those games. Whilst there aren't things to pop your robot, it's very easy to get stuck between obstacles on the screen and go back and forth getting nowhere. This game may be worth having a quick look at, but I can't see it having much long-term appeal. Next, in 9th place with 75%, is Nether-Earth from Argus Press. You play a resistance fighter, Captain Fergus McCaffrey, and you control an anti-gravity machine. Your purpose is to build war machines and defeat the evil race that's taken over the Earth. Gareth found the game to be great fun, with reasonably good graphics and shadowing effects reminiscent of the arcade classic Zaxxon. He felt the game expensive but worth it. Mike didn't like the game on first go, but found it much more playable after the game unfolded. He summarised it as fun and quite reasonable at the price. Ben described this as a strange mix of strategy and action that works surprisingly well, although found the game could get monotonous when you start to lose. He found the sound to be above average and the game on the whole to be well worth a look. This game has an unusual 3D perspective, which in some ways is almost close to a top-down view. It's responsive enough, but the landscape quickly gets repetitive, and there doesn't appear to be enough excitement in the game to really keep you playing. Maybe worth a quick look, but not a game I'd want to return to that often. Finally in 9th place with 75% is Sceptre of Baghdad from Atlantis. In this arcade adventure you play a chubby caliph who has woken up shrunk and whose palace has been infested by vicious creatures and monsters. Your quest is to find the Sceptre of Baghdad mentioned in the title. Gareth rated this game as decent. He felt the graphics moved smoothly, although the game could do with a tune and a few more sound effects. Ben found some of the problems hard even when a solution had been provided. Although the graphics were good, he felt the abundance of static characters gave the game a lifeless feeling. Paul also praised the attractive and colourful graphics, and described Sceptre of Baghdad as a steal at £1.99. This is an arcade adventure with a feel quite similar to something like Pyjamarama from issue 10. It doesn't quite have the polish of that game, but is graphically pleasant enough and has nice enough sound effects. There are enough antagonists to give this game an element of arcade and avoiding them, but most of your effort will be on solving the puzzles. Had this game been released a couple of years earlier, I think it would have scored more highly. Not an amazingly impressive game for 1987, but worth a play if you like arcade adventures in the Pyjamarama vein. In 8th place with 83% is Kobashi Naru from Mastertronic. This is an icon-driven adventure game. In this game you have to complete 3 trials, behind 3 separate doors and become one with the Immortals. Derek Brewster reviewed this in the Adventure Troll column. He felt it to be similar stylistically to a game called ZZZZ reviewed in issue 33, although not reaching the top 10 in that issue. However, he felt the game had resolved some of the input problems of the prior game. He found the icon-driven input to be totally fresh and engagingly original, especially with the way that nouns could be selected from the location description. He was impressed that a budget game was making these kind of advances in adventuring. He found the game a real head-scratcher, although the presentation was attractive and the responses fast. On the whole, he described the game as a superb piece of programming for the paltry sum required. This is another text adventure driven with icons. In some ways the user interface is similar to that of the Kingdom of Krell from last issue, although I find this one a bit snappier. It's so good that as you select each icon, text appears telling you what action it does. The ability to select words from the location description is a good feature as well. Unfortunately, with all the icons, there's not much space left for pictures. What is there seems fairly basic and nothing special. Text descriptions are reasonable, although all in caps. I feel the presentation of this game could have been improved slightly. Nevertheless, once used to selecting from the icons and text, this seems an okay game. Although it scored low in the Kingdom of Krell, I prefer it. In 7th place with 84% is Matt Lucas, also known as Matt Lucas Florida Detective, from Players. This is a text adventure in which you play a private investigator in Miami. You have to find out what has happened to your crime-fighting partner, John Harpinger. Derek found that although the program doesn't set the world alight with innovation, he was impressed with its competence for the low asking price of £1.99. He described the location descriptions as showing a fine writing style, and felt the problems interesting, even if the solutions were unimaginative. He found the vocabulary friendly without being a pushover, but the response times were occasionally slow. On the whole, he found Matt Lucas to be a really fine game for the asking price. This game is not named after the UK comedian, and at the time of release Matt Lucas the comedian wouldn't have even been heard of. No, this Matt Lucas is a Florida detective. It's not a bad text adventure, and playing a detective in modern times is reasonably original for a Spectrum adventure. My biggest bugbear is with the presentation. Again, this is a game that goes for a font that just looks too stylised and is not easy to read. The graphics are hit and miss, the first picture being quite blocky, but later pictures improving on this. I enjoyed the setting and the humour of the game, but it's always slightly annoying when a game doesn't understand the get command, preferring take. Not a bad little game and probably worth taking a look at if you like adventures. In 6th place with 85% is Auf Wiedersehen Monty from Gremlin Graphics. This is the next instalment in the adventures of Monty Mole, a follow-up to Wanted Monty Mole from issue 9, and Monty on the Run from issue 20. In this game, Monty travels around Europe collecting money to buy his very own island. Richard found this game to have a style recognisable as a Monty Mole game through the graphics and infuriating puzzles. He was quite happy with this and had no problems with the £8 asking price. Paul found this game contained all of the attractive points of its predecessors. He found it playable, although pretty much more of the same compared to what had come before. Mike found this to be a good buy, with smooth attractive graphics, lots of different screens, and an interesting and addictive game design. I owned a few games from this issue back in the day, but this is the game I probably played the most out of these. I found it a lot easier to get into than its prequels. I loved the screen layouts and how they represented countries in Europe, the tunes that varied according to which country you were in, and the superb title screen music. Coming back to this and remembering how much I enjoyed it, I'm surprised it didn't get a crash smash. It's certainly my favourite of the Monty games and one I highly recommend. In 5th place with 86% is the Sydney Affair from Infogrames. This is a follow-up to the Vera Cruz Affair from issue 34. Like that game, this is split into two parts, the first involving taking pictures of a crime scene, and the second in which you get witness statements, query police computers and attempt to work out who carried out the murder. Derek described this as a Vera Cruz clone, finding it ran parallel to the early game in just about every way. He was most critical about part 2 of the game, finding it as negative as the first game as the instructions were not explicit enough. He disliked the white background and found the input routine to be a touch sensitive. On the whole, he rated it as a superb idea, but wasn't totally convinced that it had been presented that well on the Spectrum. Despite this, he gave most scores except vocabulary in the mid-80s. This is very much in the same vein as the Vera Cruz Affair, and I don't really understand why it received a higher rating than that game, and certainly not why it received a higher rating than Auf Wiedersehen Monty. The first section is slow-paced and not at all interesting once you've done it once. The second section has the same flaws as in the original game. It's just too obtuse as to what you're supposed to be doing. If you're the sort of person that enjoyed the first game in this series, play this, otherwise don't bother with it. Now we're on to this month's Crash Smashes, starting with the 4th placed game, Activision's Enduro Racer, with 92%. This is another arcade conversion, this time of the Sega motorcycle racing game, although sadly not including a bike to sit on. Gareth was impressed, finding this a very realistic arcade conversion. He described the graphics as amazing, with hills, dips, jumps, trees, rocks and stones, well designed and excellently animated. However, he is less impressed by the in-game tune. Although finding the price a little high, he found this well worth the money. Mike said that this knocked the pants off Spectrum race games. Although criticising the sound, he found the graphics superb, and rated this as a game that road race fans couldn't survive without. Paul described this as the ultimate race game on the spectrum, and one of the most addictive race games you'll ever see. This was not a game I'd played before, and indeed I think it may even be the first motorbike racing game we've seen since Full Throttle, all the way back in issue 7. That game was great for the time, but Enduro Racer demonstrates how far things had come in the nearly 3 years since that was released. It's fast, smooth, dynamic, actually has a track with interesting features, and is just plain fun to play. A worthy crash smash, well worth playing, and probably the best motorbike racing simulation you're going to get on the spectrum. Although the next Crash Smash received 92% for the 48k version, the 128k version was given 94%, so I've put it in third place. This is Amaurote by Mastertronic. This is a 3D isometric game set in a city invaded by ants. Your job is to rid each sector of the city of insects by shooting them before proceeding to the next. Richard found that although this game's concept was an old and simple one, the presentation of the game was remarkably slick. He praised the effects and found the graphics suitably futuristic. Gareth described this as brilliant, and said that he's never seen anything quite like this before. He found the graphics superb and the animation unbelievably smooth, but was slightly disappointed by the lack of colour. He almost fell off his chair when he heard that this was a budget game. Paul found this fun to play with densely detailed scenery, lots of content and full of little features. Although finding the key layout hard to get into, he said he'd be foolish to miss a tremendous game at such a cheap price. I do remember playing this back in the day. I was gobsmacked back then by the sheer polish of it, and even being used to the graphical standard of games today, Amaurote still stands out in the way they've used the technology to best effect. It may be another 3D isometric game, but this reaches a level of polish that even Ultimate never achieved. The animation and graphics of the landscape, smoothness of play, added to by the atmospheric 128k music, all come together to make this a sublime experience. I had a smile on my face playing this game, certainly one I'd recommend. We have 2 entries in first place this month. The first is not a game but utility, the professional adventure writing system from Gilsoft, a smash at 97%. Like their earlier product, the Quill, this lets you create adventure games that can then be run separately from the utility. This extends the earlier product by including graphic creation in the same package and providing a more advanced parser. Derek rated this as better than Incentive's graphical adventure creator, and described this one as the kind of utility which can lead the way to better and more imaginative adventures. He particularly praised the manuals, which were amazingly accessible and immensely readable. He found the product showed a friendly face, with a menu system reminiscent of the Quill. On the whole, he called this a remarkable invention, and was excited by its possible achievements. With this product, Gilsoft took everything that was great about the Quill and expanded upon it. Firstly, they had combined the adventure and graphics creation from the Quill and the Illustrator into one product, as well as including the split screen and RAM save features provided by the patch. Not only this, but they had considerably expanded the capabilities of the product, including a much more advanced parser. The packaging was great as well, a large box coming with 2 manuals. I can see that this may have been released as an answer to Incentive's graphic adventure creator, and is certainly the better product. It retains a lot of the structure of the Quill menu system, so those people familiar with that would have taken easily to this. £22.95 was very expensive at the time, although as I recall, purchasing the Quill, the Illustrator and the patch together would have set you back the best part of £30 anyway. I don't recall that many games made with the product. It's a shame that this didn't get the market share of the Quill. Also in first place, again a smash with 97%, is the Sentinel from Firebird. This is an original game in 3D first-person perspective. You're on a landscape overviewed by a Sentinel. You play a robot with the ability to absorb energy from other objects and create new instances of yourself. Your task is to defeat the Sentinel, but you can only move around by creating a new version of yourself, transferring to it and absorbing the old you. Ben described this as a completely original concept, superbly implemented to produce one of the best computer games ever. He found it jam-packed with atmosphere and nail-biting tension. On the whole, he called this state-of-the-art software and said, buy it. Paul found that although the game appeared complex, it was fiendishly simple. He liked the way that as you progressed, you were given codes that let you pick up from where you left off on the next play. He felt it defied all adjectives. Mike called this brilliant with a magnificent concept. Although finding the graphics jerky, he found the shading and change colour option made up for that. All scores were in the 90s, with playability reaching 98%. The concept of this game is totally original, and I don't recall having seen anything like it before or since. It's a more slowly paced game, somewhat of a cross between strategy and puzzle, with careful consideration and observation needed between each move. When the Sentinel sees you, the feeling of apprehension I experience is something akin to that I had when encountering T-Rex in the ZX81 Classic 3D Monster Maze. I can see that this is not a game that would appeal to everyone. If you're looking for fast action, this may not be for you, but if you like something thought-provoking and intellectually challenging, this may be just the game to try. This month's special mention is World Games from US Gold. This game scored 71%. This is a sports simulation along the lines of Winter Games from issue 26, but featuring sports from around the world. The 8 sports on offer here are weightlifting, barrel jumping, cliff diving, slalom skiing, log rolling, bull riding, caber tossing and sumo wrestling. Gareth wasn't as impressed with this game as he was with its predecessor, mainly because of the weight when loading events from tape. He found the graphics and animation quite good with minimal colour clash, and rated it as great fun, particularly if you compete against friends. Mike rated this as one of the better sports sims available, and for the price found the playability and lastability just about right. Paul didn't feel this was up to the standard of Winter Games, and was particularly unimpressed by the lack of music. He didn't find it realistic, with the controls making you feel as if you were using a computer and not playing a sport. This may be another sports simulation in the vein of the Daley Thompson games, and not one hitting the heights of something like Hypersports, but nevertheless it's a good bit of fun with some original events to try. It's not all joystick waggling or key mashing, although some events have a bit of that. The originality of the events picked for this game is what makes it worth taking a look at. I can see it's not the greatest game ever, and it was a fair choice not to give it a crash smash, but it still brings back good memories for me and will be one for fans of sports simulations to try out. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro computing from Norlogic Retro.